Boom! What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode. I have Melissa Weinsz from LSU on talking with us. And as always, before we get rocking and rolling, wild and funny story. What do you got?
Wild and funny story. So, having the opportunity to work at IMG Academy was a blessing for many reasons. The
Yes.
interview process was a blast. I've never experienced anything like that in the form of talking about player development, athlete development. I was in strength conditioning before I did this internship with IMG in athlete development, and one of their questions was I had to tell them a story about a three-legged armadillo on a beach, and had to roll with the concept of improv and being able to speak like on the spot. So
Yeah.
that was my first exposure to hey, this is very different than the previous industry that you were in. You have to be able to quickly relate with people, think on the dime, and be able to relate with people very quickly too and tell a story. So yeah.
Yeah. So hold on, time out. That's interesting because that's kind of like how I got into, I guess, this world too. It was strength and conditioning. How did that start for you?
So I was a Division III athlete at a very small school in Ohio, to where I had the opportunity to play two sports and also try all the different things on campus. So I went into my undergrad experience thinking I wanted to be an athletic trainer, and then I also,
Then you
I
took
know,
anatomy class and you were like, scratch this.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. I took anatomy and I was like, this is wild. And then I had the chance to work in the weight room while I was there too for an internship for a class.
Yeah.
And the high energy, the intensity, the put your head down and work mentality is immediately where I fit in. So felt at home and thought this is what I want to pursue and this is what I want to do for a living. So when I
Yeah.
graduated from undergrad, pursued my master's in applied physiology and kinesiology because anatomy became a little less scary.
Yeah.
And while I was in that master's program, I took athlete development classes. Um,
Okay.
I was taking those classes when I was in an internship working at Exos, and I became a little bit burnt out with the strength conditioning side of things, and
Yeah.
I stopped working out myself. And I was like, something's wrong here. We got to pivot. And then taking those athlete development classes at the same time, I thought, okay, like this is actually something that I could make a career out of, and pivoted while I was at the University of Florida and started my doctorate in athlete development as soon as I finished my master's. So kind of a weird progression, but yeah, started in strength and conditioning.
Yeah. So did you always know that you wanted to go to school for like 15 years?
No, I did not. I definitely did not. Oh my gosh, Ryan. I when I was in undergrad, I was like, I'm done with this. I want nothing
Yeah.
to do with academia. I'm ready to go practice. And then when was finishing my master's, and I was like, I'm not fulfilled. What do I need to do next? And I'd never done research before a day in my life. My master's was non-thesis, just took comprehensive exams, wanted nothing to do with academia. And I said, joke's on me. I'm actually going to go pursue a doctorate. And by the grace of God, it all ended up coming to fruition the way that it did. So.
Yeah. And did you know too? Did you know like the college world was for you? Because like obviously like Exos, IMG, like those are kind of different worlds a little bit. You deal with like 5-year-olds from across the world up to like professional athletes
Yeah. Uh-huh.
versus like, in college you get that like 18 to 22-ish like range. Did you kind of know that was the niche?
So at first, I thought I wanted to work with high schoolers, and that exposure at
Interesting.
IMG
Yeah.
was really helpful. And that's not a good standard to compare the rest of the world to because they're elite athletes in a multitude of different ways. But while I was there in the summer as a coach, I had the chance to work with a collegiate baseball group.
Yeah.
And those conversations, the deeper connections, like that's what made me feel like this is such a vulnerable time in someone's life to where I can really help them progress through that life transition, talk about your identity, who are you truly outside of your sport. And I was like, okay, this could be pretty interesting. So I came back to
Yeah.
for my doctorate, and I started working in the student athlete enhancement department there, where I had the most incredible mentor, supervisor. She's the reason why I'm doing what I am today, and she took a chance on me by providing a postdoc position for me, and never looked back. So,
Yeah. 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 Let's go down the you mentioned like identity and like who you are, right? Like that's my jam. Like that's my thing. Like I could talk about that. Like we could spend
Yeah,
half a day talking about that.
yeah.
Is I guess like what does that like actually like look like and mean for you? Like as you have conversations with athletes that just pop in your office or just reach out, whether it be a phone call, text message, like whatever, is like what does that actually mean and like look like for you?
Yeah. Ryan, you told me we weren't going to talk about my dissertation today, and I feel like
Yeah.
but that's what I studied in my doctorate program. And honestly,
Okay.
like I experienced that personally. I was a dual sport collegiate athlete in undergrad. So leaving that sport, not knowing who I was, like I experienced it. And as an athlete, I did everything I could to still associate myself to sport by working in strength and conditioning. I worked in nutrition, worked in athletic training, worked
Good.
in sports psychology. I literally have like hit the conglomerate of different ways to stay associated to sport. But it wasn't until I took those athlete development classes that I realized this counseling space is available and open to dive a little bit deeper into
Yeah.
what your holistic experience looks like. So I try to start conversations with student athletes habitually by saying, like, I want you to know that you being an athlete in your sport is the least interesting thing about you.
Mm.
There's so many layers to who you are. I mean, we have to break it down to what do you value, what do you believe in, and how is that dictating the way that you act and move, both in your sport and off the field. So I just try to reiterate to them that I care deeply about you as a person, and that tends to open up conversation to move forward.
Yeah. How do you start like how do you start building like connections as like athletes come in, right? Because it's like, you can say like, "Hey, my door's open," but like how many people are gonna actually like walk through the door until they like have some sense of like relationship or like connection with you? So it's like athletes start to like venture on campus, or are you going out to them? It's like, how do you start to like really build those connections with them?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head by saying you venturing out to them. You have to be present physically in their space for them to realize, oh, like, who is this person and why is she hanging around? And then
Yeah.
that comes to like personal conversations on the side of like brief introduction of who I am, but get them talking about themselves. Show them that you're here for them, and just ask more thought provoking questions for them outside of how was practice today? Was class okay? Like,
Yeah.
questions, getting to know them. And then one of the best things for us at LSU is we have a centralized dining hall for all student athletes. So whenever I have the chance, like during meal hours, to wander over there and just like pop in,
Mm.
hi to people and briefly connect with them, it's huge. So then they're like, "Oh, so where's your office? Like, where are you actually located?" Always like floating around. I'm like, come to the academic center, and we're also really lucky too that in our building, this is where all the advisors and learning specialists are. So
Yeah.
they advocate so strongly for our department. So they've physically walked students to my office before too. So I've got a whole team of people, supporting our department and what we do, and then student athletes are really leaning into and buying into our programming as well. But like I said before, being physically present in their space first is all about building that relationship.
Yeah, that's funny. Is I literally yesterday had a conversation with an athlete, and I was like, "Give me my own performance review on the year, right? Like, would you like, would you dislike?" And like the number one thing, it was like your loyalty because you're here. They were like, it doesn't take a lot for us to like be on your team, so to speak. It was like the fact that like you can just show up and be here, and it's like we'll be your biggest fan kind of type thing. So it's amazing just how like you don't even have to say anything, but just the presence too of like how much that like builds a relationship. But it's like I'm interested too. It's like as you because I'm sure you guys like bring people in and like I don't know, speakers, whatever you want to call them, like just consultants, like outside people, is I feel like so many people in this space, because you made a point of like when you're in their space, get them talking about them, right? And I feel like I've personally witnessed like so many people that come in and talk about themselves of like, look at all the gold medals I have. And everyone's like, I don't give a shit, right? Like, and then they're like immediately like there's a total disconnect. Do you do you see that a good bit too, or is that just me, or what are your thoughts?
So I've been blessed since I've been at LSU to where we're very intentional in like vetting speakers and presenters and who we bring in. And those speakers have a long background of working with either professional teams or
Right,
other
right.
high caliber collegiate institutions. So they get it already. Like they
Yeah.
know what they need to do in order to sell the programming and their message that they're trying to deliver. So I've been pretty lucky since I've been at University of Florida and LSU to where I haven't experienced that. But I can't even imagine like leading, being an entrepreneur, trying to sell your programming. Like you have to be good about talking about yourself, and that's where people
Yeah.
feel. So immediately they'll go into that space and be like, "This is what I can do for you," as opposed to trying to build that relationship, that piece first. And that makes me think of the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Essential like piece of like the sweetest sound to someone's ears is their own name. Like you gotta be able to bait the hook with what they would want to eat as opposed to your favorite food too. I think that was also one of the things from the book as well. But
Yeah.
a lot of people don't understand that concept.
Yeah. 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 And you mentioned the word, so like in over the last like couple months, I've just had a lot of conversations, like I said, with like people in like player development, student athlete development. And I had no idea that this word programming like was a thing. Like it's like it's it's almost like a process, right? It's like it's very thought out and structured of like, like in this semester we're gonna kind of do this, and in this semester we're gonna do this. Um, I guess like talk a little bit about that because when I think of program, I think of like strength and conditioning, right? Like
Yeah. So Ryan, like the periodization, that
right.
progression that you need, it needs to build on a foundation of what you've already established. That's a perfect comparison. Um,
So when you came in like to LSU, like if you're interviewing it, is that like essentially like how it goes? Is like here's like how I would like structure this?
So I came in as an assistant director. So they didn't ask me too many questions about my vision and goals for programming. I kind of took the lead of the previous
Mm,
director on the direction that he
hmm.
wanted to go. But that's a great question. Now, since I've transitioned into a director role, we're starting to have more of those conversations. And at LSU, we have this really cool group. It's called the Comprehensive Education Team. So anyone that provides education for staff and student athletes on campus, we meet once a week and talk about, hey, what's your intentionality for this year and how can we help support each other? So particularly in athlete development, we collaborate all the time with our NIL department, and then
Yeah,
also alumni association because a lot of professional development overlaps between all three of our
yeah,
entities. So for us, we've kind of fallen away from like the periodization or the progression of like you start with resumes and then you go to this and you work your way up. It's been a lot of how can we make programming fun and appealing and interesting, and try to appeal to as many possible people as we can while they're there because our programming's not mandatory. So we have
yeah.
fun and inviting ways to get people in the room. So,
Got
for
to
example,
bring them with free food.
I was gonna say, Ryan, I was just about to say, we always have to do that at every event. So that's really helpful. But for example, we have a fashion show called Sweats to Suits, and we have our student
Okay.
leadership organizations walking in the show. So all of the SAC and the Black Student Athlete Association, they're all walking in it. And then
Yeah.
NIL has gone a deal with a local boutique or company for all the outfits for those student athletes.
Uh,
It's walking in the show, gets an NIL deal. And then we created educational pieces and also overlaps and diversity, equity, inclusion education in it too in a editorial magazine. And then we also made videos with our creative team. So it's a big flashy production, which everyone loves to see. And everyone loves like posting their social content of themselves afterwards too. So
man, yeah.
so it's just been like not necessarily progression as a focus, Ryan, but it's like how can we collaborate across departments to be
Yeah.
efficient and engaging and fun.
Yeah.
So
It's not real if it's not a reel, right? Like if it's not on Instagram
I
reel, it
like
didn't
that.
happen.
And yeah, that and then I don't have any like TikTok vernacular to use in this situation because I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah.
about it, but they love TikTok too. So
Yeah, yeah, I haven't ventured down is I guess I'm a little old. Everyone's like, bro, you're on Facebook? Like that's for old people. I'm like, all right, like I guess old, I don't know.
we got birthdays on Facebook. My mom, yeah, I've got some family
Yeah.
members.
Yeah, like Facebook. I told because actually it was one of the um student athlete as different director, and his big thing is just like teaching them how to use LinkedIn and like how that's just a great like networking tool and like how you can get your foot in the door and have conversations with that. And I just made the point. I was like, to me, Facebook's just a casual LinkedIn. He was like, bro, like I'm gonna like plug that in, right? It's like it's just more of like a social casual like you can still send people a message on Facebook and it's not like weird versus like I feel like it's a little bit different on like Instagram or other places. It's a
Yeah,
little
and we talk to our student athletes too. Like, if you have an article written about you or your team, like post that on LinkedIn, celebrate it. Like,
yeah.
your athletic performance shows employers and future companies so much about your current transferable skills that you have now. Like, I think that's a perfect way to put it. That it is like a casual link Facebook. So,
Yeah. Okay, so I guess like personal question maybe. I don't know. How like okay, being in college sports is like the wild, wild west, right? Like
oh
it's
my God.
always run and gun, like nonstop. And then on top of that, like doing academic work, research, whatever you want to call it, like how does that affect personal life?
Oh, great question.
Because the reason I asked too is because this goes back to kind of like your core story of like when I left college, it was like I was kind of like in this lost position of like who am I and like I'm trying to figure out all the things like of like life after sports. And so it's like I feel like there can even be like a crossover there in the sense of like okay, like I still have to have time for me. That's why I got into this work, right? Like I still have to develop it's like you always say like you are the asset. I still have to pour into me. You are your own entity, so to speak. And so I'm curious of just like how like you continue to make sure that like you get poured into like yourself with the Wild West and research and all the things.
Uh, no, that's a great question. So, being a college student athlete, being in a doctor program, I developed an insane work capacity where it's very difficult for me to know and when to say, enough's enough, you got to close the computer for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
So it has helped me be successful in my role, but it also has led me to not pour into myself sometimes
Yeah.
as I need to. When I got to the University of Florida for grad school and I was done with sports and I started running a lot and I was like, this is lonely. Like, what can I do to like still work out in fitness but also like build community? Because I meet my people through sports, through
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
activity. I'm not going to go to a bar and be meeting like my group of friends. So I actually started doing CrossFit when I got to Gainesville,
Okay.
and it was a great transition of like still having that social space
Hmm.
and connecting with people over treacherous workouts. There's nothing like adversity that brings people
Puking
together.
on each other.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So honestly, Ryan, whenever I've moved to a new place, because grew up in Ohio, spent my entire life there, moved to Florida, that's where I met people, and as soon as I moved to Baton Rouge, that was one of the first things I looked into as a CrossFit gym, and I knew that's how I could immediately build community outside the walls of work. So even if it's just showing up for that hour in the morning at 5 a.m., like those people are like, "Hey, Melissa, where are you? Like, how have you been? What?"
Yeah.
And those people have actually helped support a lot of my work events. So they show up for these
Ah.
like professional development opportunities. They bring me in for public speaking opportunities. Like it's been the CrossFit space has helped me remember that you can have balance to life with social connectivity. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so making sure I have a fitness space has helped me.
Yeah. And I feel like too, it's like I had like one of my own kind of like mentors and coach like tell me all the time. He's like, you have to, I mean, the cliche version is like you have to practice what you preach, but he was like, in everything that you're telling your athletes and teams, Ryan, is like you are your biggest billboard. Like they have to know that like you're doing it for you too. Otherwise, they're not going to be 100% like invested in it. And so it's like that's why I was curious too. It's like making sure that like because they're going to be like so how do you do that, right? Like, it sounds like great advice, but like, do you actually walk out of here and do those things?
Yeah, and someone who's amazing at this, as well as my supervisor, like he spends time in the mornings working out the facilities here and casually interacting with student athletes while he's in that space. And they're like, oh,
Yeah,
like this person makes time for themselves, like they take care of themselves, like I can relate with them, particularly like being in a space to where you're exercising and physically exerting
right.
yourself. Athletes are like, oh, they get it. So that's why.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm always like, I guess it could be a hybrid, but I'm always curious of like how people get in the space in the sense of like, you can call it mentorship, you can call it like helping others, impacting, like, like whatever it is like, I'm always, like I have a very similar like story to yours in the sense of like what drove me to get into the space was a sense of like pain because like I didn't experience the things that I wanted to. And so it was like painful. And it was like, okay, like I don't want people to experience that. First, I got to figure this out for me. Like I got to solve this equation. And then I can go kind of like solve, as many others that would listen. So like is that kind of similar of like there was a sense of like pain after college?
Oh my gosh, Ryan, like the lack of like self-awareness I had, and I didn't realize that that was a problem. I was like, all right, I think I know who I am, but like I have no idea what steps I need to take next.
Yeah.
I need help. And I didn't even know that student athlete development existed while I was at Denison. Like my undergraduate was a very small Division III school. Like we didn't like you scheduled your own classes. You did not have learning specialists, and there was no athlete development
Yeah,
department.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I was just like, all right, I know what I like, and it is lifting weights and building programming and being in that environment. So I'm gonna weasel my way into a graduate program, and I still felt lost when I got there. And I was just so lucky to where I had a doctorate advisor that celebrated practice. Like, usually, when you get into these academic
Mm.
programs, they're like publish or perish. Like, you need to make sure that you're conducting research all the time. But I had an exceptional individual that saw in me that I love connecting with people, that I'm not meant to be sitting behind a computer all day. I can write well, but my strength is loving on and caring for other people. So they said, how can we find ways for you to practically do this while you're in your doctor program? And let's focus it in athlete development. At first, I was in positive youth development and sport, and like that was fine. But it wasn't until I taught a sport career transition class for juniors and seniors, junior senior student athletes at UF that I realized like this is where I'm meant to be. So it was like personal experience, just like you said, going through it. I was like, I want no one else to experience this pain, realizing that it can actually become a profession. And while I was
I can
over
get
at,
paid to do this.
yeah, I get paid to love on and help people.
Yeah.
And while I was at Exos, I had the experience to help with the trust when they had a program come in for retired players. And that's when I actually had to interface with former NFL players and them telling me about their experience and how they were still experiencing that sense of like, I'm not quite sure who I am right now and what I want to do next. And I just happened to be taking my first athlete development class at the same time. I was like, all right, God, like,
Yeah, yeah.
you're telling me this is what I need to be doing, and it's been a seamless transition ever since.
How did that first kind of like mentor for you? Like, how did they pull that out of you in the sense of like the light bulb going off that like, hey, I meant more for connections than writing, or I meant more for talking than like, typing, like whatever it is. It's like, how did they, because it resonates with me is my first mentor is a total accident is I hit rock bottom once in college and then rock bottom after I'd started like my first company is about 3 years in. And so I'd hired this lady to like help me be a better CEO. And like literally 5 minutes in the conversation, she was like, time out. And she literally asked me the question. She's like, who are you? Like, who are you, Ryan? And I was like, well, that's a stupid question. My name is Ryan. I own this, da 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 da. And she was like, no, she's like, we're gonna go a different route if you're like open to it. And so like that sent me down the rabbit hole of like solving this equation. And so that was kind of like my light bulb moment for me. And so I'm curious kind of like how this person kind of like shed that light for you. It's like, okay, like maybe I need to like start walking around and talking more.
That's a great question too. So he made me try all the things. Like there's so many things that I did not want to do. He's like, "You're gonna publish," and I was like, "No, I don't want to. Don't make me do research." He's like,
Yeah.
you're gonna try it, and we're gonna see how it goes." And I did it. And I'm so freaking thankful that I did, because it really truly showed me I never had to think what if. And he was with me every step throughout that entire
Yeah.
process. But he wasn't dictating what needed to happen next. He was observing quietly. And he wasn't trying to remove any obstacles from me. He's like, I know you got this. Um,
Yeah.
that helped me build certain confidence and competencies in myself that I didn't know that I had.
Yeah.
And it's just like he knew all along, watching from afar. Got this. She's going to become a pracademic. She doesn't know it yet, but like she's going to have an understanding of an academic background, but be able to practice and implement everything she learns in this lab into real life experiences. So he pushed me to try.
Yeah.
He did not make me feel like he was being an overbearing like supervisor mentor. And he let me kind of come to these realizations on my own through patience and intentional conversations with me. So I was really lucky.
Yeah. 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 How much Okay, so you're from Ohio, went to Florida, and now Louisiana.
Yeah.
Was there a culture shock?
Oh my goodness, Ryan. Yes. Um, Southern hospitality is a
A
real thing.
little bit different.
Yeah, it is very different. So I guess I'll rewind. Going from Ohio to Florida, when you're walking on the streets in Ohio, everyone's like waving, like they're saying hi, and even if you don't know the person.
Yeah.
And when I got to UF, and if I'd be running, I'd like wave to the person going past me, and their eyes would just be down, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, maybe my Midwesterner is showing a little bit too much right now. So Florida was a little bit different. It's a strange melting pot of people from all over the world. But Louisiana is a true Southern, um, everyone is family. You are welcomed anytime. Our food's delicious. There's so much rich tradition and culture here, and we want everyone to be a part of it and to love it. It's so warm and inviting. So it was a very easy transition to come to Louisiana and be proud of and excited of like living here, which happened like almost instantaneous.
Yeah.
It's hard not to with all the hype and school spirit around LSU and particularly athletics.
Right, right.
So that was a very easy transition. My transition from Ohio to Florida was a little bit different, but still met some incredible people nonetheless.
Yeah, yeah, because I just think like I'm originally from Alabama and then I went to West Virginia and I was like everyone was like from like Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and so it was like well, New Jersey's kind of its own country, but like that's a like they're just a different breed of people. But like everyone was just like so blunt, and I was like this like little conservative boy. I was like, oh my God, why is everyone dropping F bombs after every word? Like, you are so mean. And they're like, what are you talking about? Stop being so soft. And I was like, I'm sorry.
Those weren't the Ohio people, were they? Those were the New Jersey and New York,
Um,
right?
yeah, like it's interesting though too. It's like there, the majority of the people, like I don't know like what the exact percentage was, but it was like so close to the Pennsylvania border, like where Morgantown is I think the majority of students actually come from Pennsylvania. And so it was a lot of like most of my best friends like were from Pennsylvania, and like teammates. And I was like, bro, y'all are so blunt. But it was like the best thing. And a part of the reason I asked too, it's like everyone always asks is like, would you do that part over again? And I was like, there's pieces of it that like from an athletic standpoint, I'd probably like reconsider. But I was like, I think that was such an important part of like my own life because it forced me to have thick skin. Like moving out into the real world, it's like everyone's like, bro, you're ugly. I'm like, all right, I'm sorry, right? Like it's just like, oh, like it literally forced that. So like I think that was like the biggest thing that I took away from there, just from like the culture of like that was just norm to them, right? Just to be very, very, very blunt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So how long has, I guess going back to like, thinking back to like my own experience too, is like how long is the idea? Like, I don't feel like student athlete development was a thing when I was in college, or maybe I was just like non-resourceful at all and like didn't know these things. But I feel like it's been there probably like for football, right? Like for a while. But I'm just kind of curious how long this has kind of like been a thing.
It's a great question, Ryan. And honestly, I'd say relatively new within the past like 10 to 15 years. Like
Oh
it is
wow. Okay, yeah.
it's predominant and recognized at every institution. And honestly, too, Ryan, with how, just like you said, wild west of college sports and how everything's evolving, I'm so curious to see what athlete development's going to look like in the next like 5 years.
Yeah.
Especially if student athletes start to become employees of institutions, like we're going to need bigger HR departments that understand how to interface with student athletes as opposed to like let's talk about community service ideas and different diversity inclusion education. And I'm hopeful that we'll still have like a strong presence, but I will be honest, I'm a little bit nervous.
Yeah, yeah. It almost seems like like each kind of phase, each portion can like be its own thing, which I guess it is to some level. It's like the community service, the professional development, the leadership, like all those things. It's like it almost like which part of this do you want? Do you want this piece of it? Do you want this piece of it? Um, yeah, because I can see too. It's especially athletes that actually, let me ask you, is when you first started like interacting with like the professional athlete side of things, like what was their biggest hurdle? Because I've had the opportunity kind of as well to have some of those conversations. And so I'm just kind of curious if it's like if there's overlap.
Yeah. No, great question. So, from my experience, several of the professional athletes that I've worked with, they have a lot of voices in their ears. Like they have a lot of
Yeah.
people talking over their shoulders, and it's kind of like the question of who can actually trust.
Yeah.
So, I feel like a lot struggle with that, and that's where you have to show up with intentionality. Of like, I'm not here to take something from you. I'm
Yeah.
here to love on and support you. Um, so, and honestly, too, Ryan, at this level as well, at a SEC institution, probably one of the most competitive, like some of those student athletes are asking the same questions too. Like, why are you here? Like, are you trying to take something from me? And I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah.
here to just give and provide. And I want you to be educated. I want you to have all the tools in your toolbox. I'm gonna teach you how to fish, and I'll put the fish on your plate. Like, I'm here to add value to your life. So I feel like I can't even imagine like trying to navigate all the voices of the entourage of, the people that are trying to help you be smart with your finances, make sure that all other life things are in order, but then also the people that need your help and your assistance, family members, like
Yeah.
spouses, others, like that is a lot of different voices to navigate. So I feel like that's probably the main problem that I've come across or challenge.
Yeah, and I'd say going back when you mentioned like even like the college kids like trying to figure that out too. It's interesting. Like I think this was like a month ago. I had a conversation with one of the kids, and it was like she's a freshman at a SEC school, and I was like had kind of like a breakout moment, and I was like, all of a sudden everybody started knocking on your door. She was like, "How did you know?" I was like, "Bro, like that's." And I was like, just remember like who was in like, kind of again, kind of cliche a little bit, but like remember who's in the corner when you had nothing, right? Like remember who those people are because at the end of the day, all of a sudden when you don't have anything, when you do leave here, it's like it's those same people that are reposting and talking about you and like running up to you on campus. And it's like they're the ones that are going to disappear like the fastest. So it's like, again, it's almost like siphoning through of like kind of to your point of like who can you trust and who can you not, and like who's my real inner circle and who's just kind of like over like we can be friends, but like you're not like deep inner circle with me. um, which I'm sure you guys, especially like as good of like you guys as an institute from afar, I don't know, but like from afar, like you guys at like LSU are really good with the word that comes to mind is like promotional, right? It's like this, like it's promoting the thing, right? And so it's like that 10x is it to a person, right? Because now it's your personal brand, it's your face, you're on the billboard, and when you do a good job of promoting that, then it's like, oh, then it's even more overwhelming.
Yep, we have an exceptional creative team. It's like South Stadium Productions is the name of the umbrella, but video, photo, like our media team, they're amazing and they care deeply about our student athletes too. So like we have our student athletes on podcasts, like they're always getting content for their socials. And then we have a genius NILSU department where the woman who oversees that department, she was in compliance for 8 years and she was a social media influencer. Talking about like the perfect marriage of
Yeah.
athletes about how to build your brand, and understand all the litigations and policies behind it all too. So it's like a perfect storm for, just like you said, that explosive, like in your face, this is the LSU brand and this is who we are. So it's
So I wonder too, like how much do coaches specifically there have to like weed out the people of like who truly want to be here and who want to just utilize it like as a personal brand? Because I have to imagine it's a thing, right? It's like, well, I want to go there because I'm going to build like selfishly, I'm going to build me versus like not actually like really deeply into the sport, if that makes sense.
to compete. Yeah, that's a really good question, Ryan. I've never really sat down and asked a coach that. I would be very curious to hear their answer, but like immediate thought is like some of these teams operate at the highest capacity of physical
Yeah.
performance. Like you got to be damn good to be a
Yeah.
part of these rosters. So I think a lot of the times coaches are focused on that.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that there are other pieces of the recruiting process that say like, is this person a good person? Have we
Yeah.
interacted with family? Like, where are they coming from? But I know a lot of the recruits get hyped up and excited when they see the NIL presentation and all the different benefits that come with the LSU brand. So I think that's something that we try to sell to recruits too, to get them here.
Totally.
So we want to see that they're biting, and they're excited about creating that content. But I would like to say that coaches first and foremost think about them as a player and a person. Um, but yeah, I'm curious what it's like for them to navigate that.
Yeah, yeah. Or I guess too, it could be even like once you get there, you get sucked into the rabbit hole of like I
Yeah.
only just want to build my brand, right? Like I only just want to build me versus kind of like competing and like I guess like elevating and like raising the standard of the team, like why you intentional or you initially came there.
Yep.
Um, because shit, when you're 18 and somebody flashes that kind of money in front of you, it's like that's a different world. That's a different
Yep. And Ryan, that's also when you think about like the culture of the team, right? And like
yeah.
being in our department, we have the opportunity to work with all 16 plus teams on campus, which is great. But there's a variety of different cultures across these teams, and
Yeah.
you can tell that the ones that are very intentional about building a family, a supportive space, a brave space, like those are the ones that have the buy-in, the tenure. Like there's not as much turnover with the athletes and with the coaches. So I feel like those teams have done a really good job of weeding out who really truly wants to be here. And other teams, like especially now with the transfer portal being open, Ryan, like people can pop
Yeah.
all the time, or coaches can be like, nope, not working. Go to the portal.
Yeah.
It is ruthless. When you think about this being one of the most important developmental periods of a young adult's life, like the immediate just like change of like chaos of what they're experiencing is
Yeah.
intense.
Yeah. And okay, that brings a good point too, is how much like how much do you think that they being the athlete, 18 to 22, how much do you think early on, closer to like 18, they recognize like how like important like this time like right now is? Because I think of it in conversations. I'm like, guys, I didn't figure out this till I was like 27 when I was at rock bottom for time number two. I'm like, if you can figure out this when you're 20, you're literally pushing like you're like almost a decade ahead of me, right? It's like you don't even have to grasp it all, but like just understand it intellectually a little bit.
I don't think a whole lot of them take the time to sit down and think about that or even ask themselves those questions. That's why, selfless plug, athlete development is so important because we're one of the few entities on campus that actually take the time to intentionally ask that question. Same with our advisors and learning specialists. I'm
Yeah.
so thankful for the Student Athlete Support Services umbrella because we're these safe spaces outside of sports to where we can really truly ask them, what do you want to do? What's important to you? It doesn't necessarily always hit or stick for a lot of
Right,
people.
right.
The end of their college career and they're like, oh my God, I'm done. What's next? But at least we start asking these questions as soon as they get here. And that's actually something that I've like integrated into some of my recruiting presentations is I have a little like identity piece where we go through an activity and parents are like, you all talk about this as soon as they get to campus? And I'm like, yes, as soon as they get here. And honestly, even before they get here, because we're talking about it now. Um,
Yeah.
so just it's going to take a while to build that culture to where LSU sees that as a priority and like having this conversation like athlete development's not a luxury, like it's a necessity, like it needs to be.
Yeah.
And they definitely say that by how they're investing in our department, like they provide a space for us to connect with these student athletes, but we got to get all the coaches to buy in next too. And like Tiger Life has been around for 3 years, so it's very new. It was previously in academics under the Champs Life Skills program.
Yeah.
So we're still trying to get our footing, but as soon as coaches buy into it too, I think that's really when student athletes will be like, oh, like this is pivotal. This is really important because the person that dictates my playing time and my college experience is saying like, you gotta start asking these questions. So we have some coaching staff that are all in it. They're all about it, and some other ones like they're here to win, and I get it. Like I can't even imagine the pressure of what they have to do and accomplish like at this level. But that's why Tiger Life's doing the best to come in and help the student athletes talk about those things. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's like I always say is it's to show that you don't know the answers to those questions and that's okay, right? It's not a hey, you don't know the answers to these and you're behind in life or like something's wrong with you or those things. It's like, hey, simple question, like who are you, right? It's like what do you mean? It's like like if you had to ask, and so it's like I always give the analogy. I'm like, do people write books on themselves? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, my goal at the end of this, whether that's a year, 2 years, 6 months, 4 years, is like I want you to be able to write a book on yourself. I want somebody to come up to you and go, tell me about you, and you go, hey, you're gonna need a bottle of wine in half your day because get ready, right? Like you can just know and flow, right? Like, and they're like, okay, all right. It's not like I'm Ryan. What sport you play and how many. I was like, you get
Ah,
real wild if you have a pet, right? Like, that's about as wild as we get. Like if you have a dog,
uh-huh.
um, and so it's like kind of getting them to understand. It's like that, like as you learn those things about yourself, it's like ingrain them, like put them in your book, like put them in like as a piece of it versus just like brushing it off and just like letting it go and like you just kind of quickly forget. But yeah, I think real helping them realize like it's okay to not know.
Mhm.
99% of the people don't.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a summer onboarding program for all freshmen and first year student athletes coming in transfers. And we'll do like an icebreaker intro activity on the first day. And I'll say, tell me your name and a little bit about yourself, but you can't tell me that you're a student athlete and don't tell me what sport you play. And they kind
Yeah.
of a second and they're like, this is what I've been doing my whole life and this is what I'm here to do. Like, you want me to talk and say more things about myself or different things than that? And that helps me identify personally, okay, I need to spend a little bit more time with this individual over here. And it kind of helps me get a feeler for the class that we have coming in. But it's important to ask that question. It's hard to answer, but you're just like,
Yeah.
it's okay to not know the answer.
And I think too, it's like I think on top of like not knowing it, I'm like the reason you don't know it is just like you've just never thought about it, right? Like it's just such a simple, like almost boring, mundane question, but yet like such an important question. And it's like most parents don't sit down at the dinner table and be like, "Who are you?" Right? Like that's not like a dinner time conversation, or even like a high school coach, right? It's like they try to like help prepare them to be able to like go off on their own and like go to college and things like that. But it's not to at the end, like it's not the in depth of like figure out who you are. It's just like basic skills of like be able to make decisions more so like on your own.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So very interesting. All right, last question.
Okay. What do you got?
I did not set you up for this one. I did not pre-frame you for this one. So like
Okay.
you're on the spot for this one.
Okay.
Okay. If you're in a stadium with 100,000 people and you
Yes.
could leave them with one message, what would your message be?
Oh my gosh. Oh, I love that, Ryan. Okay. So my immediate thought is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Okay.
And I have been in spaces for a lot of my professional life where I've been told or encouraged to brag about how much I know. Being in academia, it's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you want to say that you know everything. You want to say that you can create programming about X, Y, and Z. Same with strength and conditioning. You need to know all the cutting edge technology. You need to be able to be extremely proficient in everything. And honestly, Ryan, like being in athlete development, student athletes don't care about everything that you know until they know that you care about them.
Yeah.
So I feel like that transfers over far beyond just my certain profession, and that's just life in general.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's actually really, really I mean, it's literally the reason I got out of strength and conditioning too, right? It's just like I just felt like the same thing. It's just like I don't it's not a knock on people, but I just think people aren't very like intentional buzzword about like showing people that they care. Like I owned a gym sports performance place for like 12 years and it was like I'll be honest, if anybody ever listens to this, don't knock me, is just like in like 11 years there, I did zero like programming for anything because I knew it wasn't the workout that was actually going to get it. It's like, I mean, I had structured things, right? But I wasn't like, okay, and this percentage and this, and then like, and then like I was smart about it. But at the same time, it was like the value came from that they knew that I was invested in them. That's why they came. That's why they got out of it. That's why parents could be like, they have so much more confidence. I was like, just because I have a conversation with them. It's has nothing to do with the fact they can squat 225 now. Like it's totally irrelevant.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's good. Awesome, dude. Well, I love it. I appreciate you jumping on. And hey, Icebreaker, first podcast ever. So
Yes.
everyone, which I'm actually shocked from. So
Thanks, Ryan.
had fun.
Thank you. Yeah, this
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, this is great, Ryan. Thank you so much for your time. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Till next time, everybody. Peace.